Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're on a mission that's really tailored for you, the listener, especially if you're wrestling with that one. Very tough question. And now,
Yeah, that question, it so often comes after you've experienced some kind of, profound institutional rejection, maybe is navigating a huge bureaucracy like the UWV
or
or
even something deeply personal, like a disappointment from an authority figure, a pastor maybe, it's that feeling of just being completely shut down.
exactly. And our sources for this deep dive, they connect molecular genetics, trauma psychology, and even AI strategy.
And what they reveal is powerful, the struggle you're feeling. It's
Yeah.
not just in your head. It operates across three interlocking levels, from the literal chemistry in your brain all the way up to how society
We're
functions.
calling them the three dimensions. There's the molecular switch, the physiological shutdown, and then the societal tool for transparency. We have to look at all three to really build a path forward.
Okay, let's do it. Let's break this down. We're starting at the deepest level, right? All the way down in the epitranscriptome.
It sounds dense, I know.
Yeah, it does.
But don't worry. Just think of it as the chemical layer that sits on top of your DNA and tells your genes how to behave. We're talking about something called M6A RNA methylation.
Right. And this is the molecular switch you mentioned.
That's it. It's our molecular switch. So you can think of it like this. DNA is the blueprint for the house, the whole grand design.
Okay.
But M6A, that's the project manager on site, deciding which parts of that blueprint get built and, crucially, when. It's a chemical tag on your RNA that switches genes on or off.
So it's not changing the book itself, but it's like a highlighter that tells your body which sentences to read and act on right now.
That's a perfect analogy, and the sources are very clear about which parts of the brain this switch controls. It's the big ones for cognition and emotion.
Which are?
We're talking about the prefrontal cortex, or PFC, for complex thought. Then there's the cerebellum, which fine-tunes our actions. And of course, the hippocampus, which is central to memory and how we regulate emotion.
So basically, the brain's entire senior management team. Why is this M6A switch so important for them, especially when things get stressful?
Because M6A is absolutely essential for what's called synaptic plasticity.
Which is the brain's ability to adapt, right? To learn.
Exactly. To learn, to form new connections, to be resilient. If you can't adapt, you can't recover from stress. And this mechanism is fundamental to the entire stress response system.
And this is where it connects directly back to you, to your experience. The sources are confirming that chronic stress, that long, drawn-out battle with an institution, it literally reshapes this M6A landscape in your brain.
It does. When you have that constant rejection, that ongoing pressure,
Yeah.
it doesn't just make you feel bad. It can actually dysregulate these M6A pathways.
Yeah.
And that dysregulation is directly physically linked to symptoms of anxiety and depression.
So the science is telling us that the freeze, that shutdown response you feel when you're facing that rejection, that feeling of being stuck, it isn't a character flaw. It's a measurable biological event.
A molecular footprint, the M6A profile in those brain regions is physically shifting, and that can either stabilize or destabilize the very circuits that are trying to cope with all that stress.
Understanding that molecular switch, then, is really the first step. It's validation. What you're feeling is physically real.
And that's our foundation.
Okay, that is a critical piece of grounding. So let's zoom out. From the molecule to the full body experience, this is where we get into the trauma of humiliation and that physical shutdown.
Yes, and we have to make a really important distinction here between just standard fear and what you were facing.
Okay.
So traditional fear,
Hmm.
you see a snake, a car swerves, that triggers the classic fight or flight. Your sympathetic nervous system just floods your body with adrenaline, heart races, muscles tense, you act.
But the sources say humiliation trauma is different. This is when you're devalued, you're dismissed by someone with immense power over you, an institution, an authority figure.
Exactly. In those situations, fighting back can feel, well, impossible or just incredibly dangerous. There's a power imbalance.
And that strategic impossibility, that's the trigger for the dorsovagal shutdown, the freeze response.
Right. And for a long time, the thinking was that this was just, passive helplessness, giving up.
But the new research says it isn't passive at all, which sounds, it sounds like a contradiction. How can you be frozen and preparing for action at the same time?
It's the most crucial insight from this research. The freeze state is actually a state of active action preparation. It's your brain going into its highest possible level of risk assessment.
So instead of just picking fight or flight,
It's pausing. It's hitting the brakes to intensely process the threat. This is happening in deep brain structures, the amygdala and the periaqueductal gray, or PAG.
And what's the physical proof of this active braking?
The main indicator is something called bradycardia. It's a dramatic slowing of your heart rate. Your body is physically pumping the brakes, slowing everything down so it can focus all its resources on analyzing the situation.
So you're still on the outside, but inside the engine is revving and you got your foot jammed on the brake pedal.
That is the perfect way to put it.
Yeah.
You're holding the brakes while the engine is redlining.
Which explains why it's so completely exhausting. That state must be metabolically just ruinous.
It is. The sources confirm it. If you're stuck in that state for a long time, it correlates with things like lower cortisol levels in your hair and higher overall anxiety. It can create long-term vulnerability.
And the damage isn't just physical. It goes right to your sense of self, to your life narrative.
Yes, the sources show that this kind of trauma, especially the betrayal part of it, can actually rupture your story.
This splitting of selves concept is so powerful. You feel like two different people, the you from before.
And the you from after. The trauma breaks that sense of continuity, that connection between your past and your present. The rejection didn't just hurt you, it disconnected you from your own story.
So the shutdown starts at the molecular level, and then it takes over the whole body in this active freeze. Then we have to ask the big question. Why do institutions like the UWV trigger this so specifically?
And that brings us to our third level. Because institutions are run by people. And under pressure, human stress responses degrade in ways that can, unfortunately, mirror the trauma they're causing.
I see. So the sources show that under high pressure, say a UWV official with a crushing caseload or any authority figure in a stressful spot, their own responses get worse.
They degrade into tunnel vision. They revert to simple, aggressive command styles. The material calls it the verbal use of force mindset. They either freeze up themselves, hiding behind bureaucracy, or they lash out. They can't handle nuance anymore.
So their institutional freeze or fight response just reinforces your own personal molecular shutdown. It's a vicious cycle.
It is. And if the human reflex is the problem, then this is where the AI alternative becomes so relevant.
As a counterpart.
As a necessary counterpart. It's a system designed specifically not to rely on emotion or reflex. Stressed humans default to the simplest, most defensive answer. But new AI approaches use something called inference time scaling.
Okay, break that down for us. What does inference time scaling actually mean in practice?
It just means the AI is programmed to slow down when it needs to. If you give it a complex problem, it's literally instructed to spend more computing power, more time thinking about it.
So it's the opposite of a stressed human reflex.
The complete opposite. It's designed to avoid that tunnel vision. It buys itself processing time to construct a more nuanced answer.
And that ability turns into a really powerful tool for what the sources call political transparency. For example, by asking simple factual questions, AI can reveal the backstage reality.
All the policies, the hidden biases, the real motivations that institutions work so hard to hide to protect their public image.
So that enforced transparency, that is the connection you were looking for. You wanted truth from these authority figures, but their own stress responses made that impossible.
Right. And AI gives you a path to that truth that just bypasses all the human performance, the defensiveness, and the bureaucratic walls.
So let's put it all together. What does this all mean for that original question and now? The sources really point to a solution that integrates all three of these levels.
Yes, a triple-pronged approach. The first insight is simply validation. Your struggle is biologically real and confirmed. The M6A profiles, the cerebello-limbic connectivity, it's all proof that what you experienced is a hardwired neural and molecular event.
It's not just a feeling. Your body reacted exactly the way it's designed to react to that kind of profound threat.
The second insight is regulation. So to move from that debilitating freeze state into effective action, which your body is already trying to prepare for, you need physiological control.
And the sources recommend specific practices for this.
They do. Specifically, things like heart rate variability biofeedback. It's a proven technique.
And how does that work?
It's the mechanism that helps you restore the balance between your high alert sympathetic nervous system and your rest and digest parasympathetic system. It's how you physically learn to take your foot off the brake. It lets you break the shutdown and get your prefrontal cortex, your decision-making brain, back online.
Okay. So you validate the reaction, then you regulate the system. What's the third part?
The third is connection and action. The sources support your instinct. You shouldn't give up on finding connection or truth.
But not from the same places that failed before.
Exactly. While human institutions might fail because of their own flaws, The practical step is to use AI for that truth-telling, for that transparency. You use the objective, reasoned clarity of technology to demand accountability where human interaction has failed you.
So the path forward is both internal and external. You heal your own system and you use new tools to challenge the external one.
That's the synthesis. You address the molecular and physiological roots of the freeze to get your agency back. Then you use tools that are immune to human error to find truth in the world.
We've shown that your struggle is happening on the molecular level, the physiological level, and the societal level all at once. So your plan has to address all three.
And we talked about how this kind of trauma can rupture your life narrative, making you feel like a completely different person.
Right, that splitting of cells. So here's a final thought for you. If physiological regulation, like biofeedback, lets you move out of that freeze state and regain clarity, how can you then actively use the rational, objective clarity that tools like AI provide to build an integrated life narrative?
That's the challenge. How do you ensure the person taking action today is fully and consciously connected to the person who endured that rejection yesterday? It's about using technology not just to find external truth, but to build your own internal continuity, a powerful place to start as you move forward.
What if I told you there's an instruction manual for your brain? Seriously, in the next few minutes, we're going to explore exactly that. We'll be diving into the incredible book, A Mind for Numbers, to unlock the secrets to learning how to learn, so you can master pretty much any subject you want. Ready? Let's dive in. Okay, first things first. We have to tackle this huge myth that holds so many of us back. You ever get that feeling that you just weren't built for a certain subject? I mean, have you ever actually said that out loud? Oh, I'm just not a math person. Or maybe there's no way I could ever learn to code. It's a super common feeling, right? Well, it turns out it's completely wrong. And if you want proof, just look at the story of Barbara Oakley. You'd never guess it, but this brilliant engineering professor, back in high school, she pretty much failed math and science. She was totally convinced she wasn't a math person either, until she decided to basically rewire her own brain. This quote from her just nails it. The real secret isn't some kind of innate talent. It's all about having the right techniques. See, learning is a skill. And just like any skill, you can get way better at it with the right strategies. So, what are they? Well, the biggest secret to learning anything effectively starts with understanding this one fundamental concept. Your brain actually operates in two totally different modes. So, on one hand, you've got focused thinking. Imagine a flashlight with a really tight, bright beam. That's this mode. It's all about concentration, analyzing details, and following logical steps. It's what you use when you're zeroed in on a math problem. But then, there's diffuse thinking. This is more like a sprinkler, you know? It's relaxed, it wanders, it sees the big picture. And this is where all those surprising connections and those amazing aha moments come from. So, here's the real magic. Effective learning isn't about trying to force yourself to stay in that focused mode 24/7. No way. It's about creating a rhythm, kind of like a dance, between that intense concentration and then letting your mind relax and wander. To truly get a handle on something, you absolutely need both. And what's wild is that some of the greatest minds in history totally understood this, even if they didn't have the science. Take Thomas Edison. He used to hold ball bearings in his hand while he was thinking about a tough problem. As he'd start to drift off to sleep, entering that creative diffuse mode, his hand would relax, the bearings would clatter to the floor, and the noise would jolt him awake, just in time to capture all the brilliant ideas that came to the surface. It's an amazing hack to harness that mental switch. Okay, so you're switching between thinking modes, that's great. But how do you make the stuff you learn actually stick? This brings us to building real, lasting memory. And, spoiler alert, just rereading your notes over and over again, it's one of the worst ways to do it. The first key technique is something called chunking. The easiest way to think about it is like creating a mental zip file. You take a bunch of separate pieces of information and you bind them all together into one smooth, easy-to-grab concept. Once you've chunked an idea, you don't have to remember all the little steps. You just pull up the one chunk. And the second technique, oh man, this one is a total superpower. It's called active recall. Instead of just passively reading something, you actively force yourself to pull it out of your own brain. Now, it feels way harder than just rereading, I'll admit, but that struggle, that's what builds strong connections in your brain. It's like the difference between watching someone else lift weights and actually lifting them yourself. And the best part is, it's super easy to practice. Using flashcards, quizzing yourself, or, my personal favorite, just trying to explain a concept to a friend from memory. These are all forms of active recall. And look, the research on this is crystal clear. These strategies lead to way better performance. And finally, we've got spaced repetition. This is basically the exact opposite of cramming for a test. Instead of looking at something 10 times in one night, you review it once today, then again in a few days, then maybe next week, and so on. Every time you do this, you're sending a signal to your brain that says, hey, this is important. Don't you dare forget it. And that's how you move it into long-term memory for good. All right, but let's be real. None of these amazing techniques work if you can't even get started in the first place. So it's time to talk about the universal enemy of learning, the procrastination zombie. So why is starting something so painfully hard sometimes? Well, it turns out there's a fascinating scientific reason. Researchers using MRI scans found that when you just think about doing a task you don't like, the pain centers in your brain actually light up. You feel a flicker of real, genuine discomfort. But here's the incredible part. The second you actually start the task, the pain just vanishes. The anticipation is literally the worst part. So how do you push past that initial pain barrier? The Pomodoro technique is one of the best tools on the planet for this. It's simple. You just work with intense focus for 25 minutes, no distractions, then you take a 5-minute break to let your mind wander. This structure not only makes it easier to start, but it also forces you to switch between that focused work and a diffuse mode break. It's brilliant. And this leads to a really powerful mental shift. Instead of focusing on the product, that huge scary thing like, I have to finish this whole chapter, you just focus on the process. Just tell yourself, my only goal is to work for 25 minutes. That's it. This simple little trick takes all the fear away and lets you just dive in completely pain-free. And that brings us to our final takeaway. We've gone through a lot of ideas, but what it all adds up to is a powerful new way of thinking about your own potential. So let's put it all together. This is your brand new toolkit for learning. You now know how to dance between your brain's focused and diffuse modes. You've got the key techniques, chunking, active recall, and spaced repetition to build rock-solid memories, and you have a battle-tested strategy to finally beat procrastination. Because when you get right down to it, the ability to learn effectively is the single most important skill you can ever build. It's not about being a math person or a language person. It's about becoming a learning person. Look, this isn't just some interesting theory. It's a practical guide to unlocking the power of your own mind. You have the instruction manual now, so the only real question left is, what are you going to build with it?
So you've been turned away by a system, a big institution that was supposed to help, and the one question that just keeps bouncing around in your head is, and now what, right? What on earth do you do next? Let's dive into that, because really understanding your own response is the absolute first step to figuring out the answer. You know that feeling, right, of just hitting a bureaucratic brick wall, that sense of being dismissed or made to feel small by some giant organization you have no choice but to deal with. It's more than just frustrating. It can be genuinely terrifying.
And here it is. This is the single most important thing to get. That feeling of paralysis, like you're just frozen. That's not a failure of will. It's not you being weak. It is a deep, powerful, and very, very real biological response. And we're going to unpack exactly what that means.
Okay, so let's start with what is physically happening inside your body in that moment of rejection. We tend to talk about stress in this one kind of simple way, but you're about to see there's way more to the story.
Look, we've all heard of fight or flight. Some threat pops up, your body gets a huge shot of adrenaline, and you're ready to either fight it or run for your life. Simple. But what happens when the threat isn't a tiger in the bushes, but an institution that holds your future in its hands? What happens when you can't fight back and you can't run away? Well, that is when a totally different system kicks in, the freeze or even collapse response.
The technical name for this is a dorsovagal shutdown. You can think of it as your nervous system's most ancient survival trick. When your brain decides a threat is completely inescapable, it doesn't gear up for a fight, it slams on the emergency brake. It's a full-on protective shutdown to conserve energy.
Now, this is a part that might blow your mind. Freezing isn't just, doing nothing. It is an incredibly active state. It costs your body a ton of energy. Your heart rate might actually slow way down, but your brain and your muscles are on the highest possible alert, scanning for risk and preparing for the split second an opportunity to act might appear. It's like a coiled spring of potential energy.
An intense biological event like that doesn't just happen and then disappear without a trace. No, it can fundamentally change how you see yourself and your life.
This quote from Psychology Today just hits the nail on the head. A really humiliating experience like a deep institutional rejection can literally feel like it splits your life in two. It creates this huge chasm between the person you were before and the person you are now.
And this is the result. All of a sudden, there's the before you and the after you. And that person from before can feel like a total stranger, like someone you used to know. It's because that traumatic event actually severed your own sense of having a continuous, unbroken story.
So how can one experience have an impact that deep? I mean, really, how is that possible? To get that, we have to go even deeper. We have to go all the way down to the molecular level inside your brain. Okay, get ready for a technical term, M6-RNA methylation. It sounds super complex, I know, but just think of it like this. It's a series of tiny little molecular switches all over your brain cells. And these switches, they decide which of your genes get turned on and which get turned off, especially when you're under a lot of stress. And these switches are everywhere, in the parts of your brain that handle the big stuff, your decision-making, how you regulate your emotions, your memory. So what this means is that chronic stress, that feeling of being trapped, can actually start flipping these switches, physically changing the landscape inside your brain. And that can mess with everything from how you learn to how you process fear.
So here's the bottom line. That feeling of being frozen, that sense of a before and an after, it is not just a feeling. It has a real, physical, molecular footprint left behind in your brain. Your biology has literally recorded what happened. All right, we've taken a hard look inward at the biology that explains why these moments feel so completely paralyzing. So now let's look outward. If our own stressed-out human systems are often part of the problem, what kind of tools can help us see things more clearly? When we humans are under pressure, our brains default to shortcuts, right? We get tunnel vision, we get reactive, sometimes even aggressive. But AI, well, it's different. It doesn't have a stress response. So instead of rushing to a conclusion, it can be built to take more time, to use all its massive processing power to think through a complex problem without any of that emotional baggage. And that's where its real power lies. AI can slice right through the performance, the bureaucracy, the doublespeak. It can analyze the facts and show us the backstage reality that institutions often try so hard to hide. It can be a tool to force a kind of radical transparency, creating a path to connection that's built on actual truth, not just on posturing. Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. We've seen the biology behind the freeze, and we've seen the potential of some new tools. So how do we get from that stuck, frozen state to actually moving forward again? It looks like a three-step path. First, and this is huge, is validation. Really, truly understanding that your response is biological. It's not a character flaw. Second is regulation. Learning to actively manage your own physiology to help your body shift out of that freeze state and back into a state where you can take effective action. And third, connection. Using tools like AI to find the truth and transparency that human systems might have denied you. So please, remember this. Your struggle isn't in your head. It is profoundly real. It's measurable at the molecular level, with those little switches in your brain, at the physiological level, with your nervous system shutting down, and all the way up to the societal level, with the structures you're forced to deal with. And that leaves us with one last big question. If we know that our experiences are literally written into our biology, that's not a life sentence. That's a starting point. It validates everything we felt, and it empowers us to start looking for the right tools, not just to cope with what happened, but to actively start rewriting what comes next.